connotative value as well as exact definitions. So hearing enabler used in such a positive way is rather refreshing, as a matter of fact. And I am delighted to support this organization, and I am honored to introduce Jarrod Jordan, who is a remarkable young man, and I'm confident has really interesting things to explain in terms of your journey of how you came to supporting both Israel and young minority students. Jarrod Romain Jordan is the executive director of the Vanguard Leadership Group, which is a nonprofit leadership development organization and honor society that focuses on raising the expectations of high-achieving minority member college students. Mr. Jordan has created a leadership development curriculum entitled The 9 Pillars of Dynamic Citizenship, which teaches the soft skills that are necessary from changing these college students, these high-achieving college students, into potentially global leaders. In advancing Vanguard's goals of creating leaders from minority college students, Mr. Jordan has worked cooperatively with foundations, with corporate executives, with community leaders, with public school and higher education professionals, and with elected officials on all levels of the government. Well respected in his field, Mr. Jordan is often quoted in the press and has been a featured speaker at colleges throughout the country on issues regarding minority leadership development and other significant issues of our time. Under Mr. Gordon's guidance, the Vanguard Leadership Group urged its home city, Atlanta, Georgia, to divest its pension fund of any holdings in companies doing business with the energy sectors of Sudan and Iran. And in fact, Atlanta may be the first city in the United States to have taken such a stand against both of these countries. Mr. Jordan has received a number of honors and recognitions plural. In 2002, as a rising leader, he was named to the best and the brightest on the rise in Who's Who of Black Atlanta. In June 2011, he was selected to participate in the first White House Community Leaders Briefing Service. Very cool. And as a good friend of Israel, has received a number of awards from AIPAC. In 2009, he received AIPAC's Ally of the Year Award. In 2010, he received their Jonathan R. Barkin Israel Advocacy Award. And in 2011, he received AIPAC's Advocate of the Year Award. Thank you for that work as well. I am delighted to welcome you on behalf of Shaare Zedek Medical Center and to present Mr. Jordan to all of you. So, thank you.
Wow, that was an impressive introduction.
Impressive guy.
You want your mother to hear that, right?
Yeah. You know, a lot of the things that she talked about, I was actually going to talk about in my speech. You guys already know some of the gist of what I was going to actually say. But let me again thank you guys for having me here in Los Angeles. I want to thank the American Committee for Shaare Zedek for extending the invitation and having me come out. Paul and Jennifer reached out to me and said that we wanted you to come to LA and just talk about some of the work that you have done in the past and in this intellectual salon, and I was happy to do so. I want to thank Mr. Chase for hosting us here tonight in this amazing building. Again, I want to thank Stephen for your work and advocacy for this organization, and again, honey, thank you for your work as well.
Thank you.
So, Vanguard Leadership Group was an organization that I actually helped start back in 2003 when I was a college sophomore at Clark Atlanta University. And one of the reasons we started the organization, founder of the organization is a gentleman named Darius Jones. He's a 1996 graduate of CAU. He came back to work for the university in 2003 as a speechwriter. When he got there, he saw that there was a dramatic difference in the campus culture from when he went there in the early 90s versus when I was there in the early 2000s. When he was there, students were more conscientious. They were more interested in wanting to use their academic experience to go out and change the world. When I was there, students were more interested in emulating Rap City and BET. And wanted to create an organization of young men that would not only be leaders in the classroom, but outside of the classroom as well, and take on leadership roles in different campus organizations. And one of the young men who joined us in that early rendition of Vanguard Leadership Group, who were the Men's Initiative program then, is actually here tonight. His name is Taj Tashambe. He actually lives in California. I've been trying to get Taj to move back to Atlanta, but he is oftentimes quoted a very famous R&B group from his hometown of Oakland called Tony, 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 and said that it never rains in Southern California. And so therefore, I'm not coming back to the East Coast where it's cold. So
he loves the commute from Irvine to Pasadena every day.
Yeah, Taj actually works for a company in Irvine. He lives in Pasadena. He told me he spends an hour going to work and coming home both ways. And I couldn't fathom that because it was unconscionable to me to think that you sit in the car that long, but hey, that's LA.
He's listening to Tony, Tony, Tony.
Exactly. We also have two of our former students in the back, Demetrius Jones, Johanse Salmon. They were in Vanguard Leadership Group as well. They're also both from California, and I'm glad to see them as well. So let's fast forward. In 2007, we changed the focus of our organization. So we went from being a organization that was primarily focused on teaching young men at Clark Atlanta University to be leaders in the classroom, outside of the classroom, specifically on CAU's campus, to actually being a leadership development organization and honor society for high-achieving minority college students. And the reason that we made that focus change is because within the African-American community, there's so much time, effort, and attention focused on students who aren't high-achieving, students who may come from a disadvantaged family background, students who may who have learning disabilities. And our contention is that, yes, we should challenge that group to do better, but the students who are already high-achieving, we should challenge them to go even further than they expect to go in life. And so that's kind of the focus of what we do. In 2008, we were introduced to APAC. And it actually happened because another young man from California, I don't know why our California people are so ambitious and inspiring, but he was doing a semester in Washington program at American University. And he actually met a young man who worked for APAC, and he told him about the amazing work we were doing in Atlanta. And we were this young African-American organization that was focused on these global issues and training these global leaders. And so they met with us and said, okay, you guys need to come to policy conference. So we came to policy conference. This was 2008, major presidential year. So you had John McCain speaking, Hillary Clinton spoke, and then Barack Obama gave a speech, then Senator Obama. And his speech was so inspiring to us, and he mentioned the historic relationship between the African-American community and the Jewish American community, and how we've worked together to really change the course of history in America. That when we went back to Atlanta, we asked Mark Kleiman, who does he's the Southeast Regional Director for APAC, was there any divestment efforts happening at the city level? We knew that there was state divestment taking place around the country. But what about at the municipal level? He said, no, that wasn't really our focus. So we said, well, hey, we have some relationships at the city of Atlanta. Let's see if we can, spark the conversation and see if we can do that. And fortunately for us, there was a young council member who understood the importance of Atlanta doing that and making such a stance. And he got the resolution passed unanimously with really out much debate. And unbeknownst to us, as Honey mentioned, Atlanta was the first major metropolitan city in the nation to pass such an effort, divesting its pension fund monies from Iran and Sudan. And in the next year, in 2009, Jonathan Kessler, who does leadership development for APAC, who's been a tremendous advocate for Vanguard Leadership Group, he said, well, the national board wants to do divestment at the college level now. We have 3 schools we want to target. We want to target Harvard University because the president and first lady went to Harvard, and so many other famous luminaries in American society have gone there, including Stephen, who I've learned tonight. And Northwestern, because because so many people within the administration from Chicago, Northwestern alums, and Morehouse College, these two gentlemen's alma mater in the back. And out of the 3 schools that were targeted, Vanguard Leadership Group, we took on the Morehouse portion because we're in Atlanta. Morehouse was the only school that actually agreed to say that they would not invest any of their endowment money in companies doing business in Iran and Sudan. And it was a major, major effort that we led, and we're proud of that. Morehouse College is the alma mater of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we know the tremendous impact that he's had on American society, and we thought that it would be a tremendous statement for that school to make that stance. Fast forward a little bit to last year, and this is where David and Jennifer came into contact with me. Jonathan Kessler, again, he reached out to us and said, there's an organization called Students for Justice in Palestine. They are organizing on every major campus in the country, and they're promoting this assertion that Israel is an apartheid state. And we wanted to know if your organization would author a response and say that it's not an apartheid state, and making the connection between apartheid, South Africa, and what's taking place in Israel is patently false. We said, sure, I've been to every policy conference since '08. Our students have participated in every Salon since '08. Darius Jones and I spoke at policy conference in 2009. We went to Israel in 2009. So we felt very comfortable, taking that stance. So we authored the letter, and Jonathan came back to us and said, well, there are 4 schools that we want to target and take out ads in their student newspapers to really promote this message. So UCLA was one, Brown University, University of Maryland, and Columbia University. So out of all the schools, Columbia was the only school that said, no, we're not going to publish the ad because it's too political. And so then one of the staff members said, well, maybe you guys should do it as an op-ed. So we said, okay, we'll do it as an op-ed. And that was also rejected. But within that letter, again, we basically stated that making the assertion that Israel is an apartheid state, again, is patently false. What happened in South Africa cannot be compared to any other situation in the world. I mean, you had a complete system of dehumanization in that country, and that's not what's happening in Israel. You have an Arab members of the Knesset, you have an Arab member of the Supreme Court, you have Arab members in the cabinet. There were no ANC members from Robben Island a part of the cabinet in South Africa under apartheid. There weren't people, they didn't even have property rights during that time period. And so we were very, very happy to make that stance, and that's where Paul and Jennifer found out about us, because fast forward again to last fall, Jonathan said, well, Students for Justice in Palestine are getting ready to hold a national conference at Columbia University promoting this assertion that Israel is an apartheid state, and they're bringing in national speakers. They're telling their organizers how to promote this message nationwide. And we would like for you guys, again, to put your ad out there, this time in the New York Jewish Week, to say again that it is patently false that Israel is an apartheid state. And to use such language is inappropriate, and to really promote the message that words do matter at the end of the day. I know that we all say things sometimes offhand, but when you put things in the public sphere, they do have an effect. They do have an effect on people's perception. And we want to promote that Israel is not an apartheid state, and that it is a safe place to visit, and it is a great friend of the United States. And we want to play our part in continuing to promote the U.S.-Israel relationship. Let me talk about why this is important and why it matters and why I'm here tonight. The African American community and Jewish community here in America have had a 100-year history of working together to promote social change. I don't think that there have been two groups in this country that have worked together for so long promoting social change in this country. If you think about the relationship between Julius Rosenwald, who was the CEO of Sears Robot Company back in the early 20th century, and Booker T. Washington, who started the Tuskegee Institute, and the Rosenwald schools that they built together throughout the South. You know, in areas in the rural South where the county leaders had no intention of building primary schools for the black population, because they wanted them to be permanent. They wanted them to be a permanent underclass. They wanted them to continue to be sharecroppers and to never really, you know, learn and educate themselves. And think about the tremendous impact that had in changing Southern culture. You know, think about the NAACP. You know, the NAACP would have never gotten off the ground if it were not for the support of Jewish Americans. And I was sharing this with Paul earlier, and we were meeting with David Siegel, the Consul General here. The NAACP's highest award that they give out is called the Joel Springarm Award, named after Joel Elias Springarm, who was one of the founders of the NAACP. He was actually one of their first presidents of the organization. And as a matter of fact, the NAACP, under their former structure, they had an executive director and a president, which was equivalent to chairman of the board. They had a Jewish president up until the 1970s. But that's a part of history that's not really expounded upon, that contemporary society doesn't hear all the time. Let's fast forward to the relationship between Mordecai Johnson and Justice Louis T. Brandeis. You know, Mordecai Johnson was a 25-year-old graduate of Morehouse College who became the first African-American president of Howard University. One of his first visits was to Justice Brandeis, who was on the Supreme Court at the time, and he asked Justice Brandeis, what should a young man who's just taken on this position as the first president of the most prestigious historically black college and university in the country, what should I be doing? And Brandeis said that you should create a legal program that will take the hinge pin out of the doors of segregation. This is the 1920s. Howard University pioneered civil rights law in this country. And we all know their famous graduate was Thurgood Marshall, who led the Brown v. Board of Education decision in '54 that was a legal basis that destroyed segregation in this country. But if it wasn't for the relationship that he and the advice that he got from Justice Brandeis, would that have occurred? Would that, you know, decision have fundamentally changed our country? Would it have occurred? Think about the civil rights movement. You know, a period in this country that really defined contemporary American society. You know, the civil rights movement just didn't benefit African Americans. It has benefited every marginalized group that has ever faced discrimination and persecution in this country, whether it be African Americans, Latinos, Asians, you know, gays and lesbians. Anyone who has ever experienced discrimination has benefited from the work of the civil rights movement. But it would not have happened if it wasn't for the countless contributions of Jewish Americans around the country who didn't sometimes live in the South, who traveled from northern cities to very hostile areas, giving their time, talent, and treasure to a movement that they believed in would fundamentally change this country. And it did. And we're appreciative of the contributions that you made to us. And that's why I go around the country and I promote this message of African-American community and the Jewish community coming back together, working together again to see what we can do in the 21st century. You know, I was joking with Paul earlier, you know, within VLG, we call it getting the band back together, to borrow an analogy from the Blues Brothers, where we respect the contribution and the effort that you all have made in our development in this country. And we know that Israel is in a time of need now. And we feel that we can lend our support to this issue and want to lend our support to this issue to make sure that the U.S.-Israel relationship is a permanent part of the American foreign policy, and that more African Americans and more minority groups in this country understand the importance of that issue. You know, Israel is the only democracy within the Middle East. it is surrounded by a neighbor of hostile individuals and hostile states. And we know the media doesn't always portray that. You know, Israel is oftentimes portrayed as the aggressor. And our contention is that we want to show that, you know, it is a great nation to visit, it's a great nation to be a part of, and we want to play a role in helping to shape the dialogue for the 21st century in the relationship. So I know it's my time is up. We'll take Q&A, but again, thank you guys for the opportunity.